Nixon's Southern strategy, has been working for the Republican Party ever since, well, in 64, Barry Goldwater had a version of it. And then in 68, Nixon, with the help of Lee Atwater and Paul Manafort, who were, business partners back at the time, rolled this thing out. And it's been basically at the core of every Republican, at least at the presidential level, and I think, frankly, at the Senate level and probably in most of the state races, at the core of the Republican Party's efforts to get elected ever since, is this, white supremacist sales pitch. White people are better, white people are smarter, white people are, fill in the blanks, right? All the whole white supremacist thing, that just because of the amount of pigment in a person's skin, everything else is different, which is complete BS. But this is the sales pitch that Nixon has been promoting, or had been promoting, and then Reagan was promoting, and then Bush was promoting, and now Trump is promoting. And the only difference between Trump and Nixon really is that Nixon was speaking in code, and Trump is just saying it right out loud. I mean, he's just saying it right out loud. Look at this, he was in El Paso. There was this little kid. I mean, all the news stories talked about this little kid whose mother fell on him trying to protect him from the shooter and broke his fingers. He's a 2-month-old baby. And mom was shot and killed, and dad was shot and killed. Dad was diving for the floor. Mom was diving on top of the baby. The baby was the survivor. So the baby was home. And Trump shows up at El Paso, and none of the survivors will be seen with him. And so they dig the baby out. They bring the baby back to the hospital so that Trump can do a photo op. And he's doing a photo op. Melania's holding the baby, and Trump has got this big grin on his face, and he's doing 2 thumbs up. Really? Like, isn't this cool? Really? I mean, I don't even know what to do with this. The little baby is named Paul and Chando, as his parents were Andre and Jordan. They're both dead. I mean, we were told, no, this is not a photo op. And what's particularly bizarre about it is that the picture was not released by the baby's family. The uncle was there. The uncle brought the baby back to the hospital. The uncle says that he's a Trump supporter. And, God only knows what to do with that. But it wasn't the family that released the picture of Trump holding the baby or Melania holding the baby. It was Melania, or at least her office. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon, the guy who, ran Trump's campaign, put him on the map, made him president, in part, was in France this week giving a speech on behalf of Marie Le Pen's National Front. And he said, and I quote, "Let them call you racist. Let them call you xenophobes. Let them call you nativists. Wear it like a badge of honor. Because every day we get stronger and they get weaker." This is Steve Bannon speaking in France to the right-wing, neo-fascist party, the National Front. He said, "What I've learned visiting Europe is that you're part of a worldwide movement that is bigger than France, bigger than Italy, bigger than Hungary, bigger than all of it. And history is on our side. The tide of history is with us and will compel us to victory after victory after victory." Oh, I remember speeches like that. Go over to YouTube and plug in Triumph of the Will or Leni Riefenstahl, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has known since April, this is from Raw Story, has known since April that for the entire year of 2018, all of the acts of race-based domestic terrorism in the United States were committed by white supremacists. All of them. And what did the Trump administration do this year in response to that news from last year? They eliminated funding and programs to stop white supremacist extremism and white supremacist violence. and white supremacist terrorism. And then what did they do with the report? They blocked the data from Congress. Bill Barr himself intervened with the Department of Justice and said, no, Congress is not going to get this report. The report was circulated throughout the U.S. Justice Department back in April. And the Justice Department, under Bill Barr, refused to hand over the data or the documents to Congress. Meanwhile, the Anti-Defamation League, in January of this year, had released a report. The title of the report kind of says the whole thing: right-wing extremism linked to every 2018 extremist murder in the U.S. So what does Trump do with this? These mass shootings, he uses them to promote himself. Of course. This man has no shame. He's boasting about his poll numbers. This is an actual quote from Donald Trump. It is interesting because every time there's a horrible act, and this is a shame in many respects, but from the standpoint of what happens, every time a really bad act takes place, like Paris, it happened with Paris, it happens now, my cold and was go up. My poll numbers go up. Here's another quote. This is from the Washington Post. Early Thursday morning, Trump did it again. This time he retweeted a supporter who pretty clearly appeared to suggest that the shootings in San Bernardino, California on Wednesday, shootings that killed 14 and injured 17, would help Trump's poll numbers. This is, after the Pulse nightclub shooting. Trump bragged, "Appreciate the congrats for being right on radical Islamic terrorism. I don't want congrats. I want toughness and vigilance. We must be smart." He wrote, "I'm getting thousands of letters and tweets that I was right about the whole situation." He says, "I've been getting thousands and thousands of tweets and letters and phone calls that I was right. Congratulations. I was right. I've been right. I am right." He suggested that President Obama was complicit in the Orlando shooting. This is in the Washington Post. Donald Trump seemed to repeatedly accuse President Obama on Monday of identifying with radicalized Muslims who have carried out terrorist attacks in the United States and being complicit in the mass shooting at a gay nightclub in Orlando over the weekend, the worst the country has ever seen. In that same interview, Trump was asked to explain why he called for Obama to resign in light of the shooting, and he answered in part, quote, "He doesn't get it, or he gets it better than anybody understands. It's one or the other, and either one is unacceptable." Right. I mean, this is bizarre. Meanwhile, I get this email from FreedomWorks. Barney Rubble is signed up over at FreedomWorks. Barney, Nancy Pelosi, Elijah Cummings, and Chuck Schumer have been in Congress for decades, and yet their constituents are no better off because of it. Baltimore has a higher murder rate than some of the most dangerous counties in South America, and Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters' districts are riddled with poverty. Yeah, San Francisco is really so third world. But because they've had years in Congress to raise millions of dollars, they could stay in office for as long as they want. Help put term limits on Congress and send these career politicians into an early retirement by donating now. Thankfully, Senators Ted Cruz and Representative Tom Rooney have introduced bills to put term limits on Congress to make them more accountable to we the people. Now, this is fascinating. This is FreedomWorks. This is the group that the Koch brothers really kind of kicked off and got going. And they're pushing for term limits. Well, why are they pushing for term limits? Because with term limits, the institutional memory of Congress becomes the lobbyists. They're the ones who are there for 20, 30, 40 years at a stretch. And if you're rolling over members of Congress constantly, they can't figure out how things work and where things go and what people do. It's term limits are, we have term limits. They're called elections. But these artificial term limits are simply a way of adding to the strength of the lobbyists and diminishing the strength of the political system itself.